I think the thing that fascinated me about the story of Death of Robin Hood in general is it starts with this action hero, this man of adventure, and then it ends in this extremely quiet, simple place looking out a window at sunlight. And so I knew my goal was to like turn up that violence to 11. So it's like, no, we're not being like cutesy about this person of adventure. This is intense and unpleasant and something that hangs over the entire film. But then can we start there and still end in this place of like complete sort of transcendent serenity?
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a legendary thief is given a chance at redemption in director Michael Sarnoski's action drama, The Death of Robin Hood. The film tells the story of the famed thief, grappling with his past after a life of crime and murder. Finding himself gravely injured after a battle he thought would be his last, he ends up in the hands of a mysterious woman and is offered an opportunity at salvation. In addition to The Death of Robin Hood, Sarnoski's other directorial credits include the feature film A Quiet Place, Day One. He was nominated for the DGA Award in First Time Feature Film for his 2021 film, Pig. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Sarnoski spoke with director Drew Pearce about filming The Death of Robin Hood. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Everyone.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming.
I think before we start, we should just all a round of applause for Michael for...
Thank you.
I was lucky enough to see a cut of this last year. So this was officially my favorite movie of 2025, not 2026. But I'm so glad you got to see it. For me, it's, as you know, like unique structurally, unique tonally. I think it's an incredible achievement. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's just start with, I know how personal a filmmaker you are. What was the itch you needed to scratch with this movie?
Yeah, this one came from, I loved the Death of Robin Hood legend for a long time, since I was like 10 years old. I loved Robin Hood growing up. My dad and I, that was like our favorite guy. He was an outdoorsy sort of person and we would love to go camping. And so Robin was always really attractive to me. And then my dad passed away when I was 9 and our neighbor gave me a copy of his childhood Robin Hood book from like the 1940s. And I read that when I was kind of dealing with a lot in my life. And then I got to this Death of Robin Hood story and it was like, what? He just dies quietly from being like slowly bloodlet in a bed? That can't be right. And I think it just sort of clicked in at this moment when I was trying to think about, you know, important figures in our lives dying who like should live forever. And then I just became fascinated by the sort of quiet of that story for a long time and decided to write a script about it 30 years later.
I was going to say, is that a script that you wrote, years ago, or did you just let it percolate as the idea and then came to it?
It percolated for a while. It was, I knew if I ever was going to do a Robin Hood thing, it would be The Death of Robin Hood. And I think it had been in the back of my mind for a long time. And then I made a movie called Pig. And then I was getting a job to do Quiet Place Day One. And that would have been like, that was my first studio movie. And I think before doing that, there was a part of me that really wanted to like just get this script out that had been sort of in the back of my mind for a long time. So like a month before I got that gig, I just decided to hole up and write a vomit pass of Robin Hood just to kind of get it out and be like, okay, it was a dumb idea to do a Robin Hood movie. Let's put it in a drawer and call it a day. But I really fell in love with it. So I kept kind of working on it while doing Quiet Place. And it became this kind of passion project in the background and my next sort of like indie film after the studio thing.
Which feels like a good way of talking about Hugh Jackman, because though this movie was a 30-day shoot and under 20 million, it is also a towering, iconic performance by Hugh. First of all, how did you get him involved? Like, did it take a lot of meetings? Was it love at first sight?
It took like, I don't even like telling this story because I feel like I know it's never going to happen again, and I feel like it makes people feel bad, but like he read the script in like 2 days. He had heard that it was floating around and was like, yeah, I want to take a look at that.
That's the first impossibility here.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he read it in 2 days, and within a week we were meeting at an Irish pub in New York called Peter McManus. And within like 5 minutes of the meeting, it was just really clear that we both wanted to do it together. And then, there's always the ins and outs of figuring out how to make certain things happen. But like, it was pretty immediate and pretty incredible. He really just engaged with the material. It was the same with Jodie. I think she read it in like a day or two, and we were meeting at Peter McManus Irish pub. I used to go there a lot in post on Quiet Place. It was a stressful period. And we just, I don't know, they just got the script. We're really excited to explore the characters, and it was too easy. I don't know. I
mean, not too easy. It's never too easy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, obviously Jackman's legacy as Wolverine/Logan, in a strange way, the starting point of their characters is a little similar at the beginning. And obviously you take it in a very, very different direction. But there is, for an Australian lead and a British folklore, it does feel like it, to me, speaks like to a very American tradition of a hero as well. Like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Unforgiven. And were those kind of cowboy stories also in your head as you were kind of formulating this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew some of that came naturally through as I started thinking about the Robin I wanted to explore. I knew I wanted him to be kind of in like the Celtic fringe frontier land. Like he had tried to sort of get away from the places that we associate with Robin Hood and was trying to go to these sort of like barren, Highlandsy kind of areas. So some of it just came from being like, okay, we're in this kind of like barren frontier world. And then that naturally came to this Western kind of thing. But then also I think, Western movies, samurai movies, all of these things have this kind of like, aging person of violence dealing with that. Like it's an old trope. And so it just kind of naturally sort of fell into that world.
They don't tend to stab as many children in the head as
as cowards they are.
But I mean, potentially in real life, yes. But no, and I think that's what's spectacular about it is that if you took a step back, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to use the Trojan horse of genre to deconstruct the hero. It feels like a character study as a movie.
Yeah.
I assume that was your way in, above all else, was looking at these people.
Yeah, that was always, so the thing that beyond, okay, this is such a quiet, simple death. The other thing that really struck me in the death of Robin Hood Legend was, okay, this is such an intimate death, this prioress and Robin Hood in this quiet little bedroom. And in the legend, it was always kind of like she was the evil nun and he was the goodly hero. And it was like a little black and white. And I was like, nah, if you're going to bloodlet someone to death, like there's something more going on there. Like there's something to those characters and how they find this thing together. You don't just like let someone bloodlet you to death. So it became wanting to explore their relationship, wanting to understand who is the prioress, really wanting to dive into like, no, like what if she really was a healer and really that was an important part of her identity, and this act of killing someone was a huge shift for her and something she had to kind of work through. And I was really inspired by Hildegard von Bingen, who's this German prioress from that time period. And so I really kind of like dove into who the prioress was, how to make her not just the evil nun, and how to think about what her life might have been like. And then did the same thing with Robin, like what might a medieval bandit's life have been like, and how brutal could that have been? And so it was really starting with like, how do we explore this relationship more deeply and make them more complex?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it struck me maybe the third time I watched it, but like there is a prism through which this is a revenge movie, but the revenge is the prioress's movie, like it's like a kind of Chantal Ackerman version of John Wick, at least for a while, it's amazing, the kind of slow motion revenge of the final act. How much of that tone and rhythm, which I think is so unique to this film, how much was that in you right from the jump?
That's a great question. I mean, I did always imagine, I mean, this is a movie about Robin seeking his right death. And at the beginning, he expects it's going to come from someone, wanting his blood through revenge. And then in the end, it in some ways is exactly that, but is in a way that he never sort of would expect it. He finds a right death from someone who cares about him and who he loves and respects on some level, and learns about this community and this connection. I think the tonal shift, I mean, some of it just sort of happened very naturally. It was like I think the thing that fascinated me about the story was that it starts with this action, the story of Death of Robin Hood in general is it starts with this action hero, this man of adventure, and then it ends in this extremely quiet, simple place looking out a window at sunlight. And so I knew my goal was to like turn up that violence to 11. So it's like, no, we're not being like cutesy about this person of adventure. This is intense and unpleasant and something that hangs over the entire film. But then can we start there and still end in this place of like complete sort of transcendent serenity? So that was sort of the transition that I wanted to explore in the movie. So that was like really early in the process was how do we land both of those?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously you play with that expectation of violence kind of towards the end as well. Like there is a part of your snake brain that does imagine that, Robin's going to be on the roof of the Priory. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's a siege. And obviously nothing could be further from the truth, thank goodness. But I think it's a tough trick. How do you, because there's a part of me as the audience who kind of is bloodletting myself. It's like, the violence, and the kind of lock-in. How do you manage to not make the audience feel like they're being punished for the fact that they expected that,
I mean, I think in some ways that's up to the audience a little bit. I mean, I think step one is we're not glamorizing the violence in any way. Like that is the punishing part, but that's also the sort of side that's saying like, no, we're just going to sort of state it for what it is. We're going to see that some of these characters actually have issues with this, but like it's just become so part of their lives. And then we're going to spend a long time sort of exploring it and finding that atonement. But I think in just trying to be like not showy, but blunt and brutal about it and stay with sort of Hugh's character through it and stay with his focus on sort of seeking this death. And I mean, I think I kind of wanted to be a little punishing with the violence because it is this punishment that Hugh's character is sort of dealing with for the whole movie. So I kind of wanted to push it to the point where like people were uncomfortable with it, that I didn't want it to be at all spectacular or enticing in any sort of way.
No, I think that's really interesting, particularly because there's a kind of tenet that that movie making is inherently more, open to and kind of responds better to violence than it does to peace. And I think weirdly you're quite a kind of Zen filmmaker. If you look at all three of your movies, if you look at Pig, if you look at Your Quiet Place, if you look at this, I wouldn't even necessarily say they're hopeful, but I would say that they kind of look for transcendence. What are some of the movies that you go to get that feeling?
Yeah, for this one, probably the biggest inspiration was Bergman's Virgin Spring. That was, I think it was the feeling of, I felt, and not that this is historically accurate, even though that movie was considered very historically accurate, it was like, in my mind, this is what it might have felt like to be a soul living at this point in history. And it was so, like, that movie's so connected to sort of nature and the brutality of nature, but also through that you find this kind of transcendent spirituality, and both of those things kind of go hand in hand. So that was definitely one that just like, the vibe of like how we could swing from extreme serenity to extreme unpleasant violence was really sort of charted by Virgin Spring. And then there were like other movies that were kind of smaller things, like references for, the violence at the beginning. A lot of that was like The Revenant and Valhalla Rising and these kind of just like brutal in the dirt kind of movies. And then like finding the sort of tone towards the end is like Phantom Thread or Days of Heaven in sort of this community building thing. But it's definitely like a hodgepodge of random stuff. But Virgin Spring was kind of the soul, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think, okay, so a nuts and bolts question. It is about the trickiness of, living in those times. You kind of put yourself through that as a filmmaker as well. 30 days, were there any sets at all, or was it all practical?
There were two sets that we built on stages. We built the bed chamber, which I loved that set. We built it mostly out of real stone. Our construction supervisor just, I think, was a grave robber, and he just like would come in being like, I found this amazing ancient statue. And it was like, okay, wherever you found that, that's great.
Don't
we
ask
love
the
it.
Question.
Yeah. And then we built like a little piece of that cave shrine set, and then everything else was on location. And yeah, it was rough. And 30 days in winter in Northern Ireland was not easy, and in like pretty remote places. And the week before we started shooting, there was a record-breaking windstorm that just wiped out half our locations, and we had to flip the entire schedule and then spend a month like cutting roads through the fallen trees so we could get back to our locations. And it was kind of a miracle that it happened at all. But it was also like, there's this whole sequence where they're fighting by this burning hut, and that was all practical. We figured out a way to sort of do this hut so it could burn for 15-minute stretches, and we built that in this big open field. And the day we went to shoot that scene, it started just pouring rain, and the whole field became mud, and it was miserable and so hard to shoot in. But then, like, when we turned on the fire on that hut, everything started sparkling across the whole field, and it was just that feeling of like, oh, like this was so hard, but it's so worth it to capture it in this place. And then Hugh was just like, yeah, bury my face in the mud. I don't know.
That was obviously my follow-up question, which was, how was Hugh with that night?
The amazing thing is, after the fact, he has said that was his hardest day ever shooting a movie. And he said it's the closest he's come to just being like, I just can't do it anymore. But on set, he was lovely. I mean, he's always lovely. And his version of being difficult was sitting there and just being like, guys, could I just have a minute? I just need a minute. I'm so sorry. But like, it was brutal. We were burying his face in the mud, not stage mud. It started as stage mud, and then it just all flooded. And yeah, he was like tweaking his neck, and I mean, he was incredible on that. And I don't know if many other actors could have pulled off like all of the fight scenes. There's sort of 3 fight scenes in the movie, and they all take place on that farm. And the entire shoot on the farm, including the more emotional scenes inside, was 3 days. We had 3 days on that farm. So every single fight scene we did was in like half of that time. We did like the evenings and then did these emotional scenes during the day. So he had to be so on for everything, like so ready to do the physical stuff, so ready to do the emotional stuff. We couldn't have done it without him.
Did you get a lot of rehearsal time up front of the movie? I mean, a 30-day shoot. Like, how long did you have the gang together before you went out there?
Not long, like less than a week. We probably, like, scene rehearsals we only did for like a day. Because of Pig we shot in 20 days. We didn't have much budget, so I kind of got used to not doing many rehearsals. And so on this one, we sat down and read through the script together and talked about it. And then we did some stunt rehearsals with Hugh for like a couple days. But he's also such a natural with stunt stuff. Like, he watches the stunt person do it and just is like, okay, great, I'm just gonna roll this way or this way. Nailed it. And like, he's incredible. So, you know, we didn't need too much time with him. And then I also like to leave it a little fresh for the day, so it's not, we've thought it through, but we don't know exactly how we're gonna approach it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was intrigued to see that this was the first movie you've shot on film.
Yeah.
What was the best part of that, and what was the worst part?
The best part was, I don't think there was a worst part, because the best part was that I think Pat Scola, my cinematographer who's shot all of my movies, I think we've always kind of worked like we're shooting on film. We shot list like crazy. We go beginning to end and have a book of the entire shot list. And then on the day, we, you know, execute that. We don't do multi-cams. We don't do coverage. Like, we're very specific. We don't do a lot of takes. Like, usually we're doing 3 takes. So I think we were already kind of shooting, mostly because of time and budget reasons. We had already learned to sort of shoot as if we were shooting on film and be very selective about it. And this just sort of felt like it brought everyone else in the crew and cast into the same space with us. Like, everyone was like, oh, this is precious and focused, and everyone was just kind of on, and it felt very sacred. So that was nice, was that it just sort of felt like the vibe that we're always trying to push was helped by shooting on film, because everyone sort of leans in with that. And then the downside, there was one time when somehow one of the reels got flashed and we lost like a chunk of shooting, but it was thankfully just some B-roll stuff. So it was great.
Thank God. You also, it was a small detail you told me the other day, but I was intrigued. There was no playback on set. Is that right?
Yeah, to save $70K, we didn't do playback. We did playback for the 3 days at the farm when we had the action scenes. And then for the rest of the shoot, we didn't do playback. But we didn't have playback on Pig either. So in some ways it was kind of like nice, because then, you know, you can spend a lot of time just like looking at stuff and thinking about if you like it. And it's like, not just either do it again or don't do it again, and just, you know, what you saw and what you felt. So it keeps things moving.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's interesting. You know, the Pig was kind of sold as a kind of porcine John Wick, but, you know, instead it was actually kind of a beautiful meditation on loss. And Your Quiet Place is technically an alien origin story that ultimately kind of speaks to acceptance of death instead. This kind of zen goes through all of your projects for me. Is that the starting point, or is that just something you keep coming to when you start these projects?
I think it's something I keep coming to. I've been thinking about it more lately, and I mean, I know that there's something that I like to do, which is not shy away from the sort of the darkness, the sadness, the things that, you know, sometimes we want to cover up and ignore, and see if there's a way to both lean into that and do that fully, whether that's the violence or the tragedy, but then still get to an ending that maybe it's not quite hopeful, but it feels somehow like life affirming or empowering, where it's like we're not ignoring the scary, sad things in life, but there's a way to both coexist with those and sort of find further connection or further meaning or further understanding of ourselves. So I think that's just something that naturally we all kind of want. And it's usually when I'm writing a script, it's because there's something that's bothering me and I don't know how I feel about it, and I want to explore it. I want to explore my relationship to loss, or my relationship to success, or my relationship to anything. And it's like in writing that script, it's an exploration of this thing that maybe I'm scared of or confused by, and I don't want to ignore that thing. I want to dive into it so that I can sort of get through it and find how I feel about it, or get a little bit of a better understanding. So I think for me, making movies is sort of bringing people along for that journey.
That's interesting to hear, because I do think, for me, your movies do an interesting thing like that for the audience, which is you're not afraid for the audience to feel quite great discomfort, but you hold them quite gently in that discomfort, you know? And I think that's really, I think it's really rare. I think it's really interesting. But I wonder, how do you get that feeling on set? How do you keep people in that space as a crew, and as, you know, particularly again when you're up against it with time, when you're, you know, you don't have the luxuries.
Yeah, I mean, I've weirdly never, I didn't go to film school, and I've never been on any other set besides my own. So when I went, Pig was the first professional set I ever went on. And I still remember going on there, not really knowing what an AD did. And I was just like, oh, wow, thank you. You're just being super helpful. This is amazing. And like before that, I had done stuff basically with like me and like a couple friends, and that was about it. So in some ways, like I just didn't, if there are bad lessons to be learned, I didn't learn them. And the one thing that I spoke to a director before shooting Pig, and they said, you know, the one thing you can control is that you remain calm. Like, you're going to be the first person that knows that everything is falling apart and the shit is hitting the fan. You're going to know it more than anyone else. And it's your job to just like remain calm, because everyone's going to model their behavior off of you. So I just sort of took that, and I was like, okay, like, we're always going to be up against it. We're always going to be figuring stuff out. But the goal is create a calm, respectful place where people feel comfortable and safe to explore the things you want them to explore. And it just makes it a more pleasant experience. I mean, there's always those times where everything's just going crazy and you're just like, I need to go like stare at the sky for a second. But like, you know, that's just part of it.
I like that you've made the absolute impossible sound quite easy and charming. Oh yeah, we just keep it calm, and everyone looks to me, and I feel good. And
you might not feel calm, but if you pretend to be calm, you'll exude calm, and that helps.
But I think it does get baked into the DNA of your movies as well. I think you can really feel that as the audience in them. You know, I would say, and to embarrass you, you're easily one of my favorite filmmakers of our generation, but
I'm so embarrassed. Keep going.
But and I will say, you are very much like a filmmaker's filmmaker as well.
Thank you.
What have been some of the, and I'll force you out of humility here, but like, what have been some of the reactions that have meant the most to you from like other contemporaries or other filmmakers about Robin Hood?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, contemporaries are just people in general, or?
I mean, audiences, sure, but also other filmmakers. I feel like you have a litany of filmmaker fans as well.
There have been a couple really sweet ones. I feel like I can't say them without name dropping stuff, though. So
I mean, I give you permission to name drop should you wish to, but feel free not to.
Just really like, I think the thing that I most appreciated is filmmakers who reached out and were like, holy shit, how did you make that movie? Like, that shouldn't work and shouldn't exist, and is like crazy, and I'm so happy that it exists. And like, you know, we made this movie for a price because we knew that like this is not going to be everyone's Robin Hood. We wanted to do a challenging, grown-up version of this story, and like seeing people that have really appreciated that and love that it's a swing and that it's hard and that it's like different has been really gratifying, because that's what we tried for. We tried to make something that really didn't compromise and like might alienate some people because of it, but you know, we wanted to do something that felt real and personal.
That's why it's unique, and that's why it's beautiful. Which reminds me, I wanted to talk to you briefly about the music.
Yeah,
I do think the music's extraordinary. Tell me about how you found Jim Ghedi.
Jim Ghedi. Yeah, so Jim Ghedi is just this Northern England-based musician who had never done a score before, and I was just listening on Spotify to like a folk music radio station, and I came across one of his songs that I just fell in love with. It's actually the song in the credits. And I started listening to it while we were scouting in Northern Ireland, and we would just be in the van listening to it, and it just sort of became part of the DNA of the movie. And then I just decided to reach out to him on Instagram, and I was just like, hey man, like, I just feel like your music is part of this movie now. Like, do you want to write a score? And he was kind of like, buddy, like, I've never done that. You don't want me to do that. But we talked about it a little bit, and he got excited about it. And we paired him with Tony Lewis, who works a lot with Ridley Scott. He's a music editor. And the two of them just kind of like supported each other. And I think some musicians, not any musician can just become a composer for movies, but he just like had this sensibility that worked really well. He understood the sort of pace and tone of this movie. And it ended up just being this like amazing experience. And at the end, Jim was like, that was really fun. And Tony was like, it's not always like that, man. Don't be careful. But
I'm intrigued. How long between you sending that DM on Instagram did it take for him to get back to you?
Like a couple days, probably.
Right. Those 2 days, he either didn't check his DMs or he's like, this is insane.
Yeah. Or like, this guy's pretending to be yeah.
I love that. One of my favorite things is when you receive like a new piece of music, and it's the terrible kind of moment where it's like, I'm about to open this up and play it. I just got it. It could be the worst conversation I have to have this week because it doesn't work. What were some of the tunes that came through and they were just the gifts?
There were so many, because I like to start with sort of talking about themes and like not just being like, hey, score this moment. It's just like, hey, like, let's find like what that like, when we want to sort of feel Robin's past, or when we want to feel his connection to Little Margaret, like we sort of started with what these themes we wanted to explore were, and he would just sort of create these kind of simple little things, and then we build from there. And sometimes the thing I like the most is when you get something for a scene and you're like, like it's so pretty, but it just doesn't make sense in this scene. It doesn't work. And then you're trying to cut another scene and you're just like, hey, let's like throw in that cue just to like see how it works filling in the space. And it's like, oh my God, this was like made for this scene, which is always fun because it makes you feel like the movie has this kind of like thematic vibe all its own that like can coexist, and it's just about kind of recalibrating certain things. And that happened a lot, where he would write these beautiful pieces and we'd be like, I don't know, does it work for this? Not really. And then, a couple weeks later, we'd be trying to figure out this other thing and it would just play perfectly.
Yeah, when it starts speaking to itself.
Yeah,
it's did you play any of that music in on set, on location?
Yeah, we some of the just pieces that he had from his albums that I loved, but he does a cover of this song called Twa Corbies, which is Two Crows. It's like one of the oldest English folk songs, and that's the song that he does when they're traveling to the farm. And that was one of the first things he did. And when we were doing all of our like outdoor shooting, we would just blast that on a little Bluetooth speaker that I carried around. And yeah, it was just like that big shot of them walking through the mist over a mountain was just blasting that.
You Say Anything style with the kind of folk.
It was
folkloric.
Amazing. In the rain, just great.
Okay, well, we've not got much time left, but I really want to ask you, like, because I think of you as a very practical filmmaker, obviously very practical in that I saw the cut of this, and then as I was saying to you, I watched the released cut, and I was like, usually there's such a physical difference, and it was like, no, it looked exactly the same because you got everything in camera. And so but I'm intrigued, is there anything from this movie that when you take into making your next one Is there anything you learned that you wouldn't do again? And is there anything you learned that you absolutely will take forward now?
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't do is, let's start with the downer. What wouldn't I do again?
Start there.
I don't know. This was the best movie making experience I've had in my career. Like it came from wanting to sort of like create this family dynamic of an indie film and try and do something with a little more scale. And like it just was like a lovely group of people. But I think the things I would do, I mean, a lot of the things I want to make sure that every movie I make feels like a family. I want to feel like we're making the movie for the right amount of money. Like that gave us the freedom on this movie to make a weird movie. I think especially on my next project, like I loved how hard it was to shoot in some of these natural environments. And I think you feel that. And I think especially when you're trying to make something that feels real and has scope, shooting in these real places that you like actually have to struggle to shoot in, like, and not just places. It's like, it's when you capture those things on camera where it just, you feel the difficulty. Like, I think leaning into that and finding the fun, smart ways to accomplish that. Like, how do we make a hut burn for 15 minutes at a time? And like not being afraid of that stuff that most people initially will be like, dude, that's a dumb idea. Like,
you're like the Zen Werner Herzog. It's amazing. Well, we have to wrap up there. Honestly, you know, as I'm sure is very obvious, I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
There's an E.M. Forster quote, which is the only quote I ever remember because it's only 2 words long, and it's only connect. And I think your movies are an amazing exploration of trying to get people to connect. So I just want to congratulate you on that, and hopefully everyone else can do the same. And can't wait for the next one.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out, everyone.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.